you ever remarked that door there?
It's connected in my mind with a very odd story. Sir, come back here. How can you do this to a little girl? Look at her.
How strange. Do you recall the name of the man who knocked up the girl?
I believe it was a man by the name of Mr. Hyde.
I thought I had come across the name of Hyde a few times before, reading from the will, in the case of the decease of Henry Jekyll, and all his possessions are to pass down to the hands of a friend and benefactor, Edward Hyde, knowing he is in much worse than him not knowing he could ever be. I thought it was madness, and now I begin to fear disgrace. Jekyll may be in trouble. How could such an evil man be his heir? If he shall be Mr. Hyde, I shall be Mr. Seek. Is Dr. Jekyll at home, Poole?
I will see, Mr. Utterson.
I saw Mr. Hyde go in the old dissecting room.
Quite right, Mr. Utterson, sir. He has a key.
Your master trusts Mr. Hyde a great deal.
Yes, indeed. We all have orders to obey him.
I do not think I've ever met Mr. Hyde.
Oh dear, no, sir. He never dines here. We hardly ever see him on this side of the house. He mostly comes and goes by the laboratory.
Oh, well, good night, Poole.
Good night, Mr. Utterson.
Yes. Poor Henry Jekyll. He's in great danger. It is truly a sad business about Sir Danvers.
Yes, indeed. It has elicited a great deal of public feeling. The man, of course, was mad.
Yes. Well, I would like to hear your views on that, for I have some letters here with his handwriting, and have a feeling that it could be the handwriting of a murderer.
Is this Dr. Jekyll's? I thought I knew the writing. Is this anything private, sir?
Yes, I have a dinner invitation. Would you like to see it?
Yes, one moment, sir. Yes, thank you, sir. These writings are very similar, almost identical, except for one is slanted differently.
Rather quaint, yes.
Yes, indeed. As you say, rather quaint.
I would not speak anything of this note, you hear?
Yes, sir, I understand.
Yes.
Why I'm so late, ma'am?
The strangest thing happened. Dr. Jekyll sent me to his house earlier to go get this potion, and he told me that someone would be by to pick it up later. So I'm just waiting for them.
Well, let me know if you need anything.
Are you here for Dr. Jekyll?
Have you got it?
Yes, it's over here.
Now will you be wise? Or has a greed of curiosity command too much of you? Will you leave? Or will you stay?
I've come too far to pause before I see the end. Oh my god.
Hello, Dr. Lanyon.
Come in.
Dr. Lanyon, where have you been?
I have had a shock and I shall never recover.
Have you seen Jekyll? He's ill too.
Don't ever speak of Jekyll again. I never want to see him.
Isn't there anything I can do?
There's nothing that can be done.
What brings you here? Is the doctor ill?
He's shut himself away in his lab. I fear for him. There must be a foul play.
Oh, God. We must go.
Mr. Utterson is here to see you, sir. You see, that is not the voice of my master. He's been sending me on all sorts of strange errands for a mysterious drug, some salt. Look.
We must go in. I think something's terribly wrong with Dr. Jekyll. We're gonna open the door on the count of 3, okay? 1, 2, 3! Dr. Jekyll! Dr. Jekyll! To Mr. Utterson. was born to a wealthy family with every occurrence of an honorable and distinguished future. Thus I hide my irregularities, and with guilt, an almost morbid sense of shame. In this case, I was driven to reflect deeply in the duality of human nature. I gradually came to discover that man is not only truly one, but truly two. I began to believe that if both sides could be housed in separate
identities, the unjust might go his way, safe from the remorse of his more upright twin. I was so far in my reflections when a sidelight began to shine upon the subject of the laboratory table. I hesitated long before I put this theory to the test, but the temptation of discovery at last overcame the suggestion of alarm. I purchased a large quantity of a particular salt, and late one night compounded the elements and drank the potion. The most racking pain succeeded. When they subsided, I felt incredibly sweet sensation and a youngness I had not experienced in years. I was much shorter, but I tenfold felt more wicked. When I drank the potion once more, I again became Henry Jekyll. As the weeks went on, I would indulge in the undignified pleasures under the disguise of Edward Hyde. When I would come back from these excursions, Henry Jekyll would often stand aghast before the actions of Edward Hyde, but it was Hyde and Hyde alone that was guilty. I felt that I sat beyond the reach of fate. But one morning, I woke up with a strange sensation. Looking at my hands, I realized it was in the form of Edward Hyde, when I had gone to bed as Henry Jekyll. How could this be explained? And how could it be remedied? After contemplating my situation with much consideration, I decided to remain in my original form of Henry Jekyll, and I held to this decision for quite some time. But after 2 months, I could not restrain my desires any longer, and I drank the potion. My devil had long been caged, and he came out roaring. This was the night I murdered Carrie. Becoming Jekyll again, I was filled with remorse at Hyde's actions, and I decided yet again to remain inside Jekyll's body, especially because Hyde was now wanted for murder. But my evil half still plagued me, and one day, while I was sitting in the park, I transformed into Hyde without a lick of the potion. I had to write a letter to Lanyon and stay hidden until I could go to his house, under the cover of darkness, and retrieve my potion from him. In short, from that day forth, it seemed only by a great effort, as of gymnastics, and only under the immediate stimulation of the drug, that I remained under Jekyll. At all hours of day and night, I would be taken by the transformation. I became a creature eaten up and emptied by fever. One day, my provision of the salt used in the potion began to run low. I soon realized that my original supply of the salt was impure, and not one order of salt in all of London would function properly in the potion. You will hear from Poole how I have had London ransacked, but it was all in vain. I am now finishing the statement under the influence of the last of the old powders. This, then, is the last time Henry Jekyll can think his own thoughts or see his own face. I pray with all my might that Edward Hyde will not tear this letter to pieces. Who knows what will happen? Will he die upon the scaffold, or will he find the courage to release himself? I am careless. This is my hour of death. Here, then, as I lay down the pen and proceed to seal out my confession, I bring the life of that unhappy Henry Jekyll to an end.